Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here, choosing
Morning.
to be here this morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay. I chose to be outside this morning, just too gorgeous to be inside in my house, and this is the right choice for me anyway. So I hope you try to give you a view of the flowers coming up here on my end. Malcolm and I were working this morning, getting some mulch down. So it's nice to we have a big pile of mulch that the city of Ames uh, allows anybody to take for free. So we went there this morning, grabbed a bunch of mulch, weeded some. We have so much weeding to do, but we just did this one little patch. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Maybe see some flowers. And the flowers behind me are giving the Dharma talk, really, not me. All right. So first, what I'd like to do is give you a kind of overview of what I want to share this morning, and take what I say with a grain of salt. If it is something that speaks to you, great, that's wonderful. If it doesn't speak to you, that's okay too. We're all in this finding our own way in the Dharma, finding our way through suffering, finding our way to peace and joy and happiness. And sometimes words can be helpful, sometimes not. So take this as with a grain of salt. What I'd like to do, this is part two. This is part two or point two of 8 points I'd like to offer on what I'm calling optimizing Zazen. In other words, making our Zazen better, which sounds kind of strange from a certain perspective. But I've been writing about this, and I gave two previous talks about this. So if you haven't seen my writing or listened to the other talks, you might want to do that if you need some clarification or just to investigate these ideas a little bit more. This point today, what I like to offer, point two, is on using yoga to help us to optimize our Zazen, our seated Zen practice. The previous point was on nutrition, and um, uh, it was on nutrition and exercise. That was point one. Point two is yoga. And in this talk in particular, I want to offer three kind of segments to it. The first one is to offer you a historical context. The second one is to bring in modern yoga in the modern age. And the third point is how can yoga actually help us today? How can yoga actually help us sit Zazen? So that's kind of an overview of what I want to share. Okay, so let's go to the first point. The first thing is the historical context. The historical context for yoga. Because if you look around, we consider ourselves Zen Buddhists. I consider myself a Zen Buddhist. And it might seem strange to bring up the subject of yoga in a Zen context for some people. But for me, it's always been very much integrated right from the start. So just from my personal experience sitting with my teacher, there was a yogi in the uh, I can't remember now, the Iyengar tradition that would come and sit sesshin with us, an extended meditation retreat. And I noticed that every time she was a teacher in that tradition, and anytime we had breaks, she would be standing on her head, she would be stretching her hips, strengthening her back, and I was really impressed. I thought, wow, there's something she's doing that's helping her practice out. So for me, yoga has been there right from the very start in helping me to more easily sit Zazen. When I went to Tassajara in California, there was a program being offered at the time called Yoga and Zen, or something along that line. Is it Yoga and Zen? And the teacher, Vicki Austin, one of my dear colleagues, and I consider her one of my teachers. She said she was leading it. She said during that workshop that the Buddha was an adept yogi of his day. And then she proceeded to teach yoga And I was just really struck by that particular statement that she made, that the Buddha was an adept yogi of his day. So, what is this? What does this word yoga? What does this word yoga actually mean? The root of the word yoga is yuj. Yuj means to unite, to unite. And the word yoga, can you guys hear okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So the word yoga first appears in world literature in the Katha Upanishad. So this is a book of some of the Upanishads. These are ancient Indian texts. And one of the Upanishads is called the Katha Upanishad. I'd highly recommend reading it. It's very, very good. And it's basically about wanting a young man who desires to understand what happens after we die. And so he actually has a conversation with the personification of death. And there's this whole long conversation. And if I wasn't if I didn't know anything about Hinduism, I would say that this was a Buddhist text, the way that it reads, and the philosophical understanding is so in alignment with how I understand Zen Buddhism. Now, there's a section in the Katha Upanishad, and this is where the word yoga, according to one scholar I listened to a few years ago, she said this is where this word yoga first appears. And it's in this Upanishad, and it's connected with finding freedom of mind in conjunction with the reality of our mortality. And it reads like this. I'll read you a couple of stanzas from it. When the five senses are stilled, when the mind is stilled, when the intellect is stilled, that is called the highest state by the wise. Okay. They say yoga is this complete stillness in which one enters the unitive state, never to become separate again. If one is not established in this state, the sense of unity will come and go. The unitive state cannot be attained through words. Didn't we just read something about that? Chant something about that? The unitive state cannot be attained through words or thoughts or through the eye. How can it be attained except through one who is established in this state oneself? And then it says here, last stanza. There are two selves, the separate ego and the indivisible Atman. When one rises above I and me and mine, the Atman is revealed as one's real self. All right. So there you have it, the Katha Upanishad that comes from. And I'm going to check my audio. Hopefully that sounds a little bit better. There's just a mower in the background. I wanted to cut the sound from. So what are these Upanishads? What are the Upanishads? I heard this word long ago, but had no idea. What does it mean? So Katha Upanishad is what we just read from. The Upanishad, the word literally means sitting down at the foot of, sitting at the foot of. And it's referring to a teacher. All right, you're sitting down at the foot of a teacher. And the Upanishads are considered universal wisdom that can be applied to any age that we live in. So it's got relevance for even us today. And these Upanishads, they have their origins in what's called the Indus Valley. In the Indus Valley, there's this Indus Valley civilization, and it's not too if you look at a map of India, the Indus Valley is kind of in the northwestern part of what I think would consider Pakistan today. My geography might be a little off here, but uh, the Buddha was his clan, the Shakya clan, was not too far from the Indus Valley civilization. They were in kind of northern central India in present day Nepal. And it begins these prior to the Upanishads coming into being, about 2000 BCE, you have these hymns that you can find in what's called the Vedas. Vedas meaning spiritual knowledge. They crop up about 2000 BCE, so roughly 4,000 years ago. And these hymns are celebrating nature, the sun, the moon, the sky, the dawn, you know, water, fire, air, all of these elements. And if you ever get a chance to look at some of these hymns in the Rig Veda, they're really, really gorgeous. And the Upanishads kind of spring off from these hymns. Then they come into being roughly between 700 BCE and 400 CE. So there's a span of about 800 years in there where the Upanishads begin to develop. And this is so if the hymns were for to create an external sacrifice to the natural world. The Upanishads were internalizing the sacrifice. And this is where the meditative tradition begins to, you see the meditation tradition begin to emerge through the Upanishads. And the Buddha, his life, right, his life is right in the midst of this major revolution taking place in India. So he was studying with people who probably had access to various Upanishads, whether he read the Katha, in those days they didn't have it written down, but he must have been familiar with the philosophical tradition of that time, which includes the Upanishads. And of course, these hymns in the Rig Veda, these sacrifices were done specifically by the Brahmin, by the priest, for, guess who? The warrior caste. And who was the Buddha before he became the Buddha? He was a warrior. He was in the warrior caste. And he lets that caste go to become a Brahmin, a priest, but actually a home leaver. So the Buddha's wisdom, what emerged from the Buddha, is really indebted to this larger context in which he lived in, this Indian wisdom, the Upanishads, the Vedas. And the Buddha also contributes to this rich spiritual wisdom. The Yoga Sutras, according to another scholar, are said to be inspired by the presence of the Buddha, or the success of the Buddha's teachings. And we could say even that Zen couldn't be in existence without this yogic tradition. One of the schools of Buddhism, in fact, takes its name from yoga. It's called Yoga Chara. And any of you who are interested in learning about Yoga Chara, I would highly recommend this study. It's something that I've been kind of chewing on slowly for the past 10 years, but this particular book is excellent. It's about Yoga Chara, and it's written by one of our Zen priests, Reb Anderson, out at the San Francisco Zen Center. It's called The Third Turning of the Wheel, the wisdom of the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra. So it gives you a sense of what yoga is for Buddhists. Yoga, another way we can talk about yoga or to define yoga, it is a science of the mind. And the question that we could ask ourselves is, how do we make the mind more flexible, right? Dogen talks about something called Nunanshin, or a soft and flexible heart, mind. Just to give you an example of inflexibility, um, in my own, like my son, my son has attached to a particular teacup that he has to have. And it's interesting. I switched the cups the other day, and I gave him a different cup to drink from, and he was extraordinarily resistant. That's not my cup, Dad. I want the other cup. Right? That's an example of inflexible mind. That you have to do it this one way. And we're all, not only are we all susceptible to that kind of mind, we all do it. And this is the origin of suffering, is that we don't have a flexible mind. We can't just we have to have things a certain way, a certain order. They have to be done because of tradition, because somebody said so, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Yogacara is teaching us to have that soft and flexible mind to say, okay, I don't have to have this. What if I had it? What if we did it a little bit differently, right? This is the heart of yoga. The point is, though, that we all attach to wanting things to be a certain way. We all attach to wanting things to be certain. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like change. But this is the point of our practice. This is the point of Zen practice, to cultivate that soft and flexible heart mind, that Nunanshin. That's what, when Dogen came back from China, it said that he was asked by one of his followers. He said, this Shinran brought back the teachings of the Pure Land Buddhism. Kukai brought back the esoteric teachings. What did you bring back? Which teachings did you bring back? And Dogen is said to have shared that he brought back a soft and flexible heart mind. That was one of the things I brought back a soft and flexible mind. And really, it's not about, Zen practice is not about how much you know, right? It's not about gaining knowledge about Zen, even. You don't have to know about Zen. You don't have to know about Buddhism. You don't have to study extensively. I wouldn't say don't do those things, but don't think that knowledge is going to equal freedom of mind. That's not the purpose of this practice. It's really the soft and flexible mind. And so really Zen and yoga are like that. They're like this. They're brother and sister. Okay, so that's part 1 of 3 of this talk. Part 2, number 2 point I want to bring up here is, well, if that's yoga, how do we get to modern yoga? When I think of yoga, and I'm guessing when you guys think of yoga, we think of postures, downward dog, handstands and headstands and pretzel legs, all of that. All right, so what is modern yoga? Modern yoga is a compilation of three strands, three things, 3 traditions coming together today. The first one is the Upanishads, the wisdom, the philosophical tradition of ancient India, right? That's one strand within modern yoga. The second strand is these ancient cultural poses where the yogis in those days, they found that when they were sitting for a long period of time, maybe some of you can resonate with this, when they were sitting for a long period of time, they found their body ached, right? Their knees hurt, their back hurt. And so the theory there is that toxins build up in the body. And if you turn the body this way and that way, flip it upside down, and practice breathing certain ways, that those toxins will be released from the body. And that is a source of physical pain, toxins residing in the body. And so hatha yoga, the physical practice of yoga, developed because yogis practicing the science of the mind, right, wanted to have more freedom in their body. They wanted to have more of a sense of ease in their physical body. And so they began to practice these asanas. So that's the second strand of yoga today. The third strand is actually, maybe some of you will find this interesting, British calisthenics. British calisthenics. Because now, if you think about this, the history, the Brits came into India around the 19th century, and they introduced this whole their own Western ways of understanding the world, including calisthenics. So you have this mixing and blending of these three strands of knowledge, of wisdom about how the mind works, about how the body works from both an Indian perspective and a Western perspective. And the modern yogis like uh, Iyengar, they were cognizant. They were very cognizant of Western understandings of the way that the body works from a physical perspective. They were indebted in some ways to Western theories of how the body is put together. Okay, so this brings us to the third point and final point I want to make today, and that is, how can we use yoga to optimize our Zazen practice? Well, okay, well, the first thing is, again, there's this remember that yoga is a rich philosophical tradition that we are indebted to. So, you can, if you want, study the Upanishads and understand, like, where did the wisdom of Buddhism come from? Right? It's a real, there's a connection with Indian philosophy. Buddhism isn't just something that happened all by itself. It's indebted to Indian wisdom. Right? And I would again recommend studying this book, The Third Turning of the Wheel by Reb Anderson. That's another way to get into the understanding of yoga. Yeah, another one is the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras, wonderful, short, pithy sayings about how the mind works. And we can look at those, we can study them. I think they're very important. I've actually put out a number of YouTube videos on some of these Yoga Sutras that you can check out. So the second thing that that yoga can help us with is the understanding of how our body works when we're sitting in meditation, right? How to sit, how to actually sit well. In the Fukan Zazengi, the Universal Instructions for Meditation, it's really, really super vague on how to sit full lotus. But Dogen says, sit either in a half lotus or full lotus posture. I don't know about you guys, but that posture is really, really difficult for any of us to do, right? To put your right foot on your left thigh, your left foot on your right thigh, and hold it there. I mean, can you do that? However, yoga, as we know it today, as we understand it today, can help us to move in that direction. And I would highly recommend. Now, I want to put out a warning here, because people will misunderstand what I'm saying here. I honestly think that we should all try to sit full lotus. Now, can I do that? Not all of the time. And I would probably injure myself if I did that. However, there is yoga to help us open our body, open our hips, strengthen our back so that we can move in that direction. And I think particularly in American society, we underestimate our ability to change, to be flexible. And we also undermine the importance of the physical body in our practice. Mental flexibility is not disconnected from physical flexibility. So I think it's worthwhile studying how this body works. And if that means taking a few yoga classes, do it if you can. But you don't have to invest yourself in a yoga class. I know, it's very uncomfortable for somebody like me, a guy, being in a class, unfortunately or fortunately, filled with mostly women, younger, wearing, very scantily clothed, right? It's very awkward for me to do that. And so I just rather not. for the most part. I'm sure some of you feel the same way. I feel like I don't belong. That's part of the reason why I've been teaching yoga. But there are Vicki Austin, who I mentioned earlier. She gave us out of this yoga workshop a little pamphlet called "How to Grow a Lotus," and by Donna Farhi, another yoga teacher, and it gives specific instructions for which muscles and things to isolate to get your legs more flexible, get your back stronger for sitting down in a lotus posture. So I'm happy to share that with anybody if they like it. And I'll also add another example here of actually the centrality of the half or full lotus posture for Zen Buddhism, particularly as it is practiced in Japan today. I know some of you, like Vicky and George and Taizan, you just went to Japan and you know how, you got to sit. You sit seiza for a long time. You sit, it's uncompromising. I don't recommend that extreme for modern America, but I want to give you an example of the lengths to which Japanese monks will go to sit in a full lotus posture, whether that's half or full lotus. One is an example that my teacher gave. And this, for some people, this will turn you off to Zen completely. And I don't, I wouldn't be surprised. So again, take what I say with a grain of salt. I found it inspiring when I heard my teacher say that there was a monk that she practiced with, that he wanted to, before he went into training, he tied his legs, his knees with bricks so that he could get his knees down to sit full lotus. That sounds really extreme, and I don't recommend it. But it tells you the length to which someone will go to be able to sit in a cross-legged posture. So there must be something important about this cross-legged posture to aspire towards, even if you can't do it. And I know, like, a lot of people will get hung up, like, I can't do it. Doesn't matter if you can do it or not. Just move in that direction. Even if you're sitting in a chair, move in that direction. Right? How do you do that? Well, we can have a conversation about how to do that if you want, but don't think that you have to do it. It's not like I'm saying you gotta sit full lotus, but I am suggesting, like, this is the tradition that comes from. Now, if you think that is extreme, I'll give you another example of my teacher's teacher, Noda Daito Roshi. And this, I was listening to these stories as a 20-year-old, so I'm a lot more flexible in the body. Now, don't think that since you're older, or some of you that are older, 40s, 50s, 60s, don't give up on yourself. Again, I was 20 when I started doing this, so maybe I had a little bit of an advantage, but don't give up on yourself just because you're older. It's never too late to learn and to study the body. So here's the example. Noda Daito Roshi, he has a temple that a big function of that temple is to work with children who are bullied. And he was working with a group of children, and he had a lot of construction going on at the temple at the same time. A big dump truck came with a load full of big rocks in it, and the guy who was driving the truck didn't see the kids, and he started to dump the rocks out where the kids were. And Noda Daito Roshi, he ran in front so that the kids would scatter and get out of the way of the moving rocks. And one of these sharp rocks cut his leg so severely that he was hospitalized by it. And while he was in the hospital, the Zenji of Sojiji, where some of you just went to celebrate Keizan Zenji's 700th year, his name was Itabashi Zenji. He came to visit with Noda Daito Roshi and asked him to be the training teacher at Sojiji. And Noda Daito Roshi pointed to his crutches and said, "Look, I can't even sit full lotus." And the Itabashi Zenji's response to that was, "You will heal while you teach." And so Noda Daito Roshi didn't know what to do, but he practiced sitting full lotus, and he couldn't do it because his leg because of the injury to his leg. But then he decided to try sitting with his feet in the opposite way. Instead of the right foot on the left thigh and the left foot on the right thigh, he reversed it. And he said that worked perfectly. So he felt he was able to do it. He could do it. And he proceeded to teach sitting in that way. All right. For me, I thought, these are really extreme. So I'm not going to tie bricks to my legs, but I will do yoga. I'll do yoga and practice getting my legs in a way that they'll be functional for sitting in a half or full lotus posture. Now, the last thing I want to say of how yoga can be functional for us in modern times is to point out something that another school of yoga called trauma-sensitive yoga. And now I can go into great depth in this, but I don't want to spend too much more time, just real briefly to say that one aspect of this particular form of yoga is about the importance of being in the present moment, having the present moment experience through bringing awareness to your physical body as a means to address PTSD. So, and I have found that this is, I facilitate these trauma-sensitive yoga classes at Mary Greeley, just down the road from me, as well as at Broadlawns Hospital on their behavioral health floors. And I can tell you that this is something really important for people struggling with any kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is bringing attention to your physical body, having a present moment experience. Now, the science of this, the word is interoception. There's a part of the brain called the interoceptive region. It's kind of the top part here, that gets stimulated when you are aware of sensations in your body. What does it mean concretely to be in the present moment? Right? We have a lot of ideas about what the present moment looks like, but in trauma-sensitive yoga, present moment is specifically defined as being in your physical body, feeling your body as it is, the sensations. So if I raise my arm up, I feel a sensation in my shoulder, all right? That's a present moment experience, to notice the sensation in your arm when you lift it up. Or to feel the ground underneath your legs when you're sitting down, to feel that contact between your legs and the ground, whatever position you happen to be in, whether you're on the chair or sitting in a lotus posture, whatever, to feel your back against the chair, right? To feel that contact. Another way of talking about the present moment within this particular context is to say that when your nervous system, when your central nervous system is in alignment with the environment around you, when those two things are in sync, you're in the present moment. How do we do that? How do we become in sync with the present moment, with the environment? How do we sync up our central nervous system with the environment? Through awareness of sensation in the body. It's the direct way. Or through awareness of the sensation of breathing. That could be another way, possible way, right? I'm just giving some possibilities here. Dropping our story, dropping the storyline, what we think is happening, and coming into the immediate present of what's actually happening, right? I've shared a lot here. I'm sorry I've kind of gone on here. I'd like to close. Open the lotus with hips and legs. Strengthen the stem with the back. Roots go deep into delusion, out of which enlightenment unfolds, pressing into reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
right, folks, it's 11:30. I don't know if there's any questions, but feel free, maybe just one or two
I have a
for we
question.
end today.
Hi, Daishin. Thank you for your talk. I have a question. How did this spiritual tradition become a for-profit exercise class in the West?
It's called capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it can be. People want to make money off of what they're doing. And but I'll tell you, if you want to be a yoga teacher, don't expect to be making very much money.
True. True.
You can't make a living as a yoga teacher unless you become really super famous. So the famous yogis get maybe a lot of attention, and maybe they're making some money. Um, but if you're you're run-of-the-mill yoga teacher, you have to have another job. You can't do this for a living.
Right. Somehow we took a really beautiful tradition that is a religion, and somehow it is now just an exercise class. I don't know of any place that I could go if I wanted to and study yoga as a religion. I'm just curious if you have any insight on how that happened.
Well, I don't think we have to. This idea of religion is so problematic for so many of us, and I don't think we have to talk about it as a religion. And yoga teachers don't use the word, but they'll introduce things like Yoga Sutras in their classes. And people, as long as you stay away from the word religion or Hinduism, people will still share these Indian philosophical traditions. Some teachers will, and so you got to choose your teachers. Who do you want to go to? But I think the word religion becomes really problematic here, because then people think, oh, I got to do this, right? As opposed to what's the way to freedom? How do I find freedom?
Like, I think there's centers in Omaha that have different focuses. Like, I've taken yoga at various places around town. Like, used to be Benson Yoga and Bodyworks. Now it's Yoga Now. But yeah, Susie Amendola runs that place, and there was always an emphasis on, careful attention and the movement of energy and the philosophical roots of yoga. And
Yeah.
even, yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
like he said, there's not a really. You'll notice that most of the teachers have a spiritual investment in what's going on. Like, nobody devotes that kind of time and attention to this without touching the spiritual aspect of it. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ken. And I just add to this idea that the physical body is somehow not like separate from the spiritual. That is very much a Western dualism, that we separate body and mind. To me, the body is a gateway to enlightenment. I'm not suggesting or saying that I have any degree of enlightenment whatsoever, but that's my teacher would say this. The physical body is a gateway to enlightenment. And I appreciate hearing that, because that's what we got. It's accessible to all of us, regardless of our bodies. The body itself is a gateway to enlightenment. So even if a yoga class doesn't talk anything about the philosophical stuff, it can potentially wake us up.
Just a quick question or comment here. Last Sunday, after, with tea and conversation, we got into a discussion about posture. And there were a number of people who acknowledged that there's a qualitative difference in Zazen depending on the way you sit. And that, I certainly have noticed that when I'm in a cross-legged posture, there's a different quality to it than sitting in seiza or in a chair or something like that. But also I think I recall, maybe it was from you, somebody, who said that the root of Kyoki's
Right.
nerve problems that ended her career as a priest came from trying to sit full lotus.
Yeah.
Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. And also, we just read in our book club from Shihako Okumura, who was talking about basically his intensive Zazen practice with Uchiyama kind of ruined his body and made him unable to practice for many years. But, then he found a way, but it was a different way. Yeah. So,
Right. Yeah, yeah, there's multiple ways. And I think that modern yoga offers a safe way to exploring how we can use our legs in a way that doesn't do damage. I think you're right that she ruined her body trying to force her legs into a full lotus. And that's one of the reasons actually that I took yoga very seriously, because I saw that happen, oh, over 25 years ago when I first met Kyoki. She talked about that. Um, and that really impressed upon me the importance of yoga, of practicing yoga. And I don't know why she decided not to do that. I mean, there could have been other ways, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, and Shohaku Okumura also. I've heard stories his back just would go out and stuff. It's not good to sit for long periods of time in one posture. It's just not healthy for the body. And that's why the yogis developed hatha yoga, right? Because they would sit for long periods of time and they would damage their body, and they knew that wasn't going to end suffering. So they started practicing yoga. We're making circles.
thank you. Yeah.
The story Daishin-san, the story I heard about the ancient sages was that these postures came to the sages while they were in meditation. That these postures, like their bodies started doing the postures. Anyway, that's the story I heard from long ago. That I think that the inner wisdom said, "Hey, this is what your body needs to heal itself." So I think that's kind of a neat idea.
Thank you for adding that. I'm not surprised. I haven't heard that articulated like you just did, but I'm not surprised at all. Yeah, it's like your body internally, it knows what it needs to do. And as far as I'm concerned, you should do it. It means going against what we happen to be doing, right? Do what makes sense for your body.
Something, and I don't want to make this too long a deal, but so in yoga you have the kriyas or the kundalini and that sort of energy work, and it seems to me that is something that we do not touch in Zen. Is that correct, or am I missing something here?
So really, I'm glad you bring that up, Ken. I would say yes and no, because the Zen tradition, it has a different way of talking about it. We talk about chi or ki, and a lot of Zen priests, like my teacher's teacher, Noda Daito Roshi, he was a kung fu. He practiced kung fu, and so he practiced taiko. And in those arts, they do talk about the energy and the flow of energy of the body. And Zazen is not divorced from that whole tradition of energy and ki. The question is, like, what is the intention? How do we use that energy?
Mm-hmm.
And for Zazen, I mean, I think one of the issues that people get caught up with in this like Kundalini idea, I don't know very much about that particular strain of yoga. It seems like, what I've heard is like opening up the chakra and things happening over there.
Sure.
And yeah, so Zen we don't really talk about things in that way. Even if it did happen, even if you feel like your mind opening up, your brain opening up, it's just another experience, and we can get caught in like a quote unquote enlightenment experience, just as we can get caught in wanting things to be done our way. So we just have to be careful. Zen just says, okay, great, you had a nice experience. Let it go. Now that was in the past. Come back to the present. This is what it is. This is what is right now. And the gift, from my perspective, the gift is we don't have to try to attain a particular state of mind. That's not the goal. We don't have that goal in Soto Zen to try to attain a specific state of mind. And this is where the tradition somewhat splits ways with, say, what I just read in the Katha Upanishad, talking about the unitive state, right? And bringing your mind to a unitive state. From a Zen perspective, we're always in a unitive state. We just don't know it. So wherever we happen to be, it's okay. It's okay. Wherever your mind happens to be, from a Zen perspective, it's totally okay. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't try to open our minds from a Kundalini perspective. Just know, like, which tradition you're studying when, and devote yourself to Zen practice when you're doing Zen. If you're doing Kundalini practice, devote yourself to that and do what you need to do there, because they're different. They're different. They're slightly different paths. As far as I'm concerned, as far as like what I know, what I've been taught from Zazen practice, great experiences happen. We don't pay too much attention to them. Like you said, I mean, yeah, we might delight in them. It's okay to delight in them, but to aim for them becomes problematic. It's like my teacher would say, do you have the experience, or does the experience have you? Right? That's the difference. That's a different mentality. If you have the experience, hey, all right, no problem, great. If the experience has you, and you're chasing for something, using Zazen to chase for something, it's just going to create internal tension. Now, if you're in a Kundalini class and you've got guidance there, hey, do that. Do whatever you got, whatever you're being instructed there, as long as you trust the teacher and the teaching and all that. But from a Zen perspective, that's just what I would share.
Sure.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Daishin.
Hey, thank you.
Wrap up now.
Thank you.
Do you have announcements or?
Only announcement is we have board meeting after